All right, ready to dive into some seriously hardcore history.
Let's do it.
Today, we're tackling Sparta.
Sparta. A civilization that practically invented the term tough love.
And we're going deep, folks, looking at how they raised their kids. Buckle up, because from what I've heard, we're about to enter the world's most intense parenting seminar.
You're not wrong. The Spartans were in a league of their own, even back then.
We're digging into this article, Sparta's child-rearing, brutal brilliance or barbaric blunder, and just that title tells you everything you need to know about how extreme these guys were.
Right off the bat, it's clear we're dealing with a society that took things to a whole new level.
So paint us a picture. What made Sparta so different?
Well, for Spartans, strength wasn't just some abstract ideal. It was the bedrock of their entire existence.
Okay, so it was like survival of the fittest times 1,000.
Basically, their entire societal structure was like a finely tuned machine geared towards one goal and one goal only: military dominance.
And that goal shaped everything, including, I'm guessing, how they raised their kids.
Absolutely. To understand Sparta's methods, though, we need to understand their context. This wasn't just a random city-state. They were ruling over a huge population of enslaved people, the Helots.
And these Helots, they didn't exactly make things easy for the Spartans.
Not even close. The Helots massively outnumbered Spartan citizens, like seriously outnumbered, and that created this constant underlying fear of rebellion.
So every day felt like walking a tightrope? I could see how that would make you a little tore.
Intense. Exactly. Imagine constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering when the next uprising might erupt. It was this pressure that led to things like the Agoj, their infamous education system.
Oh yeah, the Agoj. I've heard things. Let's just say it wasn't your average after-school program.
Think more along the lines of military boot camp, starting at age 7.
7. As in, barely older than a first grader. What?
You heard that right. 7 years old, Spartan boys were ripped away from their families. No more mommy's hugs for you.
Okay, officially more intense than I was picturing.
And it got more intense. They'd shave the boys' heads, give them one cloak, and I mean just the one no shoes, and toss them headfirst into a system designed to, well, break them down and rebuild them as Spartan soldiers.
Sounds a little brutal. How long did this transformation process last?
Not just a few weeks, that's for sure. We're talking decades. Until they were 30 years old.
30. Talk about delayed gratification. So walk us through a typical day. Were they, like, doing push-ups all day long?
Yeah, no, it was much harder than that. We're talking relentless physical training, day after day. They started learning hand-to-hand combat at, get this, 12 years old.
12. That's when I was mastering the art of begging my parents for a puppy.
And don't forget, all of this was while surviving on incredibly meager rations. The Agoj wasn't just about physical strength, though. It was about building resilience, resourcefulness. Basically teaching them how to function on sheer willpower.
That's a lot to handle. And from what I've read, beatings weren't exactly off the table.
Sadly, no. Physical punishment was a routine part of the Agoj. The Spartans saw it as a way to toughen up their boys, make them immune to pain and hardship.
It's easy to look back and judge, but back then, this was their normal.
It's a completely different world, a different mindset.
The article also mentioned they trained in, well, not a whole lot of clothing, even in winter. That's next level.
Remember, this was a society where any sign of weakness, even shivering in the cold, was seen as a liability, a crack in their collective armor.
And that brings us to, well, a part of Spartan life that's pretty hard to stomach. Infanticide.
It's definitely the most disturbing aspect of Spartan society. There's no way around that.
The article doesn't sugarcoat it. Newborn babies were examined, and if they weren't considered strong enough,
they were abandoned, left to die.
It's hard to even process that. What was their justification? How could they do that to their own children?
It all goes back to their worldview, their entire reason for being. The Spartans were obsessed with strength, with weeding out any perceived weakness. It wasn't just about the individual. It was about the survival of the entire state.
So a baby, a helpless infant, could be seen as a threat to the state.
In their eyes, a weak child meant draining precious resources and potentially weakening the future warrior class. It was a terrifying calculation, born out of their own fears and insecurities.
It's still incredibly disturbing, even knowing the context. But it seems like Spartan women had a very different experience within this system. The article almost makes them sound empowered.
It is interesting, isn't it? Especially compared to other Greek city-states, Spartan women had a surprising amount of freedom.
Give us the rundown. What could they do that other Greek women couldn't?
Well, for starters, they received physical training. Not to the same extent as men, but still pretty radical for that era. They were also responsible for managing property and estates.
Wow, so while the men were off training, the women were holding down the fort, literally.
Exactly. And they could even participate in athletic competitions. Can you imagine that happening in Athens?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
So how does that fit with this whole image of Sparta as this hyper-masculine warrior society?
That's where it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Because, yes, Spartan women had more freedom, but it wasn't about equality as we think of it today. It all came back to, you guessed it, strengthening the state.
So their freedom was more about fulfilling their duty to Sparta.
Exactly. Strong women meant strong mothers, which meant strong Spartan warriors. It's a strange paradox. Empowering women, but entirely within the framework of a militaristic society.
It makes you think about the psychological effects of this upbringing.
Yeah.
On both men and women. This sense that the state, Sparta, always came first.
Absolutely. A Spartan boy, from the moment he entered the Agoge, knew that his loyalty to Sparta superseded everything else. Even his own family.
That's a powerful concept. Trading family bonds for what? The ultimate brotherhood.
It was about creating an unbreakable bond of loyalty forged in hardship and shared sacrifice. But whether that outweighed the cost, that's the question.
So it all sounds kind of terrifying, to be honest. But did it work? I mean, all this sacrifice, all this hardship, did it actually create a Spartan utopia?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer, well, it's complicated. There's no denying that Sparta was a force to be reckoned with, at least for a while.
Yeah, their military achievements are legendary.
Exactly. They dominated the battlefield for centuries, known for their discipline, their effectiveness, their sheer willpower. And let's not forget, their society was incredibly stable.
Right.
No constant infighting like you saw in other Greek city-states.
So on the surface, it seemed like their system worked, but I have a feeling there's more to the story. This relentless focus on military strength. Did it come at a cost?
It definitely wasn't all sunshine and rainbows in Sparta. For one thing, they weren't exactly winning any awards for, shall we say, cultural achievements.
Meaning?
Think about it. Athens had philosophy, art, democracy. What did Sparta have? Well, they had really, really good soldiers.
So not much room for poetry slams in ancient Sparta.
Not really. And that rigid social structure, while it kept things stable, also made them inflexible, unable to adapt when things changed around them.
Like a muscle car that can only drive in a straight line. Impressive, sure, but not exactly built for navigating a winding road.
Perfect analogy. And that lack of adaptability, it eventually caught up with them. Their population, for one thing, started to dwindle. All those strict rules about who was considered a worthy Spartan, well, it turns out those rules don't exactly encourage population growth.
Kind of a design flaw in the whole system.
To put it mildly. So while the Spartan system seemed invincible for a time, it was built on a foundation that couldn't last. A house of cards, in a way.
A stark reminder that even the most powerful empires can crumble, especially when they put all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Sparta's story is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that strength cannot only be measured in military might. True strength lies in balance, in a society's ability to adapt, to evolve, to embrace all aspects of human potential, not just the warrior spirit.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? What can we learn from a civilization as extreme as ancient Sparta?
For me, it's about finding that sweet spot between resilience and, well, humanity. The Spartans weren't wrong to value strength, to prepare for the worst, but they took it too far. They forgot that a society is more than just its soldiers. It's the artists, the thinkers, the dreamers. They're all part of the equation.
A powerful lesson from a truly fascinating, albeit intense, civilization. It certainly gives you a lot to think about.
It definitely does.
That wraps up our deep dive into ancient Sparta. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Where do you think that line is between building resilience and sacrificing our humanity? Hit us up on social media. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep exploring those big questions.